what if the secret to surviving, life's absolute worst back-to-back crises isn't fighting your way out, but acting exactly like water trapped in a pit?
Eh.
Today, we are unlocking a 3,000-year-old psychological survival guide.
Yeah, it's a really profound shift in perspective. Like when the floor falls out from under you, every instinct in your body just screams at you to thrash and fight, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But this ancient framework suggests something entirely counterintuitive and, frankly, much more effective.
And before we get into the mechanics of how you actually do that, a quick heads up for you listening. If you want to take these ancient mental models and really master them for your own modern life, you can download the YOAW app right now on the Apple App Store.
It's an amazing resource.
It really is. We've also made sure the companion book, The Mind Key to the I Ching, is officially available on Amazon. It's just an incredibly practical toolkit.
Yeah, it takes these concepts out of the realm of abstract philosophy and turns them into grounded, tested frameworks that you can actually use when things get chaotic.
So let's set the mission for this deep dive. We are cracking open the Khan hexagram from the I Ching. And I want to be really clear with you right off the bat. We are not talking about mystical fortune telling here.
Right, definitely not.
We need to look at this as a hyper-practical framework for those moments when the bottom just completely drops out of your life.
Yeah, we're talking about, a cascading business failure or a sudden and severe health crisis, or honestly just one of those stretches where you have a string of terrible luck and absolutely nothing goes right.
Exactly. But before we get into the specific advice, we should probably clarify what we mean by a hexagram just so we have a solid foundation.
That's a crucial starting point. So if you aren't familiar, a hexagram is essentially this ancient 6-line model used for mapping out complex life situations. Think of it like a 3,000-year-old flowchart for human psychology.
Like an ancient binary code almost.
Exactly like that. Each of the 6 lines represents a different stage or a different way of reacting to a specific environment. And to understand this specific hexagram, you have to visualize its core structure.
Okay, paint that picture for us.
So the imagery used is water falling into 2 consecutive pits. Think about what that means in a physical sense. The environment around you is offering zero support. There's no solid ground beneath your feet to push off from.
Right, so you're just suspended.
Yeah, and there is no safety net above you to catch you either. You are completely surrounded by a yielding, sinking, muddy environment.
Wait, let me make sure I'm visualizing this right. It sounds like being caught in a massive corporate layoff while simultaneously dealing with a brutal personal bankruptcy. Like everything in your life is collapsing at the exact same time.
That is the perfect modern equivalent.
And you're saying the first step in this guide isn't to scramble out, but to just accept that you're in the mud.
Yeah, that is the very first of 3 core survival mindsets this framework demands. First, you have to get used to the danger.
Get used to it. That sounds terrifying.
It is, but you have to radically accept that you are soaking wet. You are in a deep pit, and this crisis is not ending tomorrow. What usually kills people in these situations, psychologically speaking, is the expectation of a quick rescue.
Oh, wow. Because you're just waiting for someone to save you.
Right. When you expect to be saved immediately and you aren't, it breeds an entirely unmanageable level of panic.
I can see that. If you think the nightmare is ending in 5 minutes, you can hold your breath. But when minute 6 hits, you drown. So what is the second mindset?
You have to keep your inner hardcore intact. Your external environment is soft and chaotic and sinking. Therefore, your internal mind must remain solid.
Because if your mind becomes as muddy as the pit, you lose yourself.
Exactly. You lose your identity completely. And the third mindset ties it all together, which is you have to keep moving like water.
Move like water. What does that actually look like in a crisis?
Well, water doesn't just sit there in a panic when it's trapped. It naturally, quietly explores the boundaries of its trap. It finds the tiny cracks, and it seeps forward.
Okay, I have to push back a little here, though. Keeping your core solid sounds great on a bumper sticker. But if I am literally losing my house or my business is going under, my core is terrified.
Sure, yeah.
How on earth do you logically harden your mind when your entire environment is collapsing?
Well, it's not about suppressing the terror. It's about separating your cognitive foundation from your emotional reaction. The terror is the water moving around, but your logical foundation is the rock underneath it.
That makes a lot of sense.
But you bring up the exact tension we're exploring here. Let's look at what actually happens when the floor first caves in. Because human nature dictates that we do the exact opposite of keeping a solid core. We default to complete paralysis.
Right. Let's track the actual anatomy of a crisis, starting from day one. What does that initial drop look like?
It is passive free fall. You drop into the deepest, darkest part of the pit. The psychological state here is pure weightlessness. Your brain just goes entirely blank.
You're completely deer in the headlights.
Yeah, you've lost your footing, you have no leverage whatsoever, and the sheer shock of the descent actually shuts down your executive function. You aren't fighting the crisis, you are just falling through it.
I think if you've ever been through a major crisis, you know exactly what that weightlessness feels like. Imagine you're a founder, and on day one of launching your startup, the one you put your life savings into, you discover a massive, critical flaw in the code.
A flaw that ruins everything.
Exactly. And a normal, regulated brain would say, okay, let's fix it. But in this state of free fall, instead of fixing it, you just sit alone in the dark, bathed in the glow of your phone, and you just doom scroll.
Oh, doom scrolling is the perfect modern equivalent of this state.
You just let the project and the funds bleed out. You're watching the crash happen in slow motion, and you do nothing.
Because it operates as a numbing mechanism. There's a shadow side to this initial stage, which we might call the giving up faller.
The giving up faller.
Yeah, this is the person who closes their eyes, goes entirely limp, and secretly hopes the disaster just swallows them whole. They would rather be consumed by the pit than deal with the agonizing pain of the impact when they finally hit bottom.
That is incredibly heavy, but it's so real. So how do you snap out of it? What is the actual actionable mechanism to stop the free fall when you are literally in midair?
You have to forcibly cut the input. You stop taking in negative feedback immediately.
So if you're doom scrolling, you throw the phone in a drawer.
Yes. You find a quiet room, you sit down, you deliberately reset your nervous system, and you simply verbally acknowledge reality. You say out loud, I am in a hole.
You don't try to solve the hole yet.
No, not at all. You don't make a plan to climb out. You just acknowledge it.
Why does just saying it matter so much, though?
Because that simple spoken admission stops the feeling of weightlessness. By defining your reality, you give your brain a psychological floor to stand on. You transition from falling to landing.
It's like turning the lights on in a terrifying room. The room is still terrifying. There might be monsters in it, but at least you can see where the walls are.
Precisely. And that brings us to the next phase of a crisis, which happens once you finally open your eyes at the bottom of the pit. You've hit the floor.
Okay, I'm on the floor. Now what?
Well, now the immediate human urge is to look up at the sky and pray for a helicopter rescue. You want a miracle to pull you out of the mud instantly.
Because sitting in the mud is incredibly uncomfortable. Of course you want the helicopter.
But hoping for the helicopter is a lethal trap. The environment is still deeply hostile, and the helicopter isn't coming. This phase of the framework is about the pragmatic pivot.
The pragmatic pivot. So this represents that solid inner core inside the water we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You have to realize that you cannot change this terrible macro environment, but you have absolute total control over your immediate localized actions. You have to shift your focus entirely away from rescue and toward seeking microscopic gains.
This might be my favorite concept so far. Let's make this really practical for you listening right now. Say you are drowning in a mountain of credit card debt and it's suffocating.
Or maybe you are in physical therapy recovering from a major illness.
Right. In this phase, you do not try to become a millionaire by Friday. You don't try to run a marathon next week. You focus on selling one old jacket on eBay to make $10 today, or walking exactly 200 steps.
Yes. And the mechanism behind why this works is purely neurological. It's about dopamine and momentum.
Because your brain needs a win.
Desperately. When you are trapped in a continuous grinding crisis, your brain is starved for a win. If you set a massive goal, like escaping the pit entirely or paying off 50 grand in a month, you will inevitably fail. And that failure reinforces the panic.
It just proves to your brain that you really are trapped.
Exactly. But if you deliberately shelve the grand 5-year plan and you just do one tiny thing today that yields a tangible, undeniable result, you prove to your brain that your engine still works.
The survival signal isn't escaping the pit. The signal is the grounded feeling of eating one single piece of dry ration. You're still in the bottom of a dark hole, but you're chewing. You're alive.
It is the ultimate exercise in psychological grounding. You lower your expectations to the absolute floor, which paradoxically gives you the strength and the clarity to survive the day.
Okay, but here is where human nature completely sabotages us again. Let's say you do this. You get that tiny bit of momentum, You sold the jacket for 10 bucks. You walked your 200 steps.
Right, you've got a spark.
The natural instinct, especially if you're a high achiever, is to take that tiny spark and immediately try to blow it up into a bonfire. You want to sprint.
And sprinting in a mud pit is how you break an ankle. This is where the danger morphs, and it brings us to one of the most counterintuitive parts of this ancient wisdom. In continuous crisis, blind action is sometimes worse than doing nothing at all. You reach a phase we can call the dead end.
The trap between the two pits.
Yes. You are completely stuck. Moving forward is a trap, moving backward is a trap. The environment is entirely unyielding. The advice here is incredibly literal, and it translates roughly to do not act.
I really have to challenge this because it flies in the face of everything we're taught today. Our entire modern culture is built on hustle culture.
Oh, 100%.
If you're stuck, you pivot. If you hit a wall, you work harder, you break through the wall. You're telling the listener that this framework says to just lie on the floor.
Yes. I am telling you to lie on the floor. You have to understand the mechanics of the environment you are in. Think of it as a forced standstill.
Give me an example of what that looks like.
Let's look at the psychology of a failing investment, or a startup that is just bleeding cash. Pulling your money out now means accepting a devastating loss, but putting more money in to try and save it is throwing cash into quicksand.
Right, the sunk cost fallacy in action.
Exactly. If you subscribe to hustle culture in this specific environment, you thrash. You try a million different desperate tactics.
And you exhaust your very last ounce of energy, your last bit of capital, running headfirst into brick walls.
The shadow side here is the blind thrasher. This is a person who simply cannot tolerate the anxiety of stillness. They act just to feel like they're doing something to relieve their own anxiety, and they usually make the situation significantly worse.
So the action guide here is profound in its restraint. Park the project, do absolutely nothing, except the painful stalemate to stop the bleeding.
Precisely.
So it's important to clarify this isn't giving up. It's recognizing that any movement right now costs more resources than you can afford to lose. You are conserving oxygen in a sinking submarine. You don't do jumping jacks in a sinking sub.
That is a perfect analogy. You are waiting for the external environment to shift because you recognize that you do not currently have the power to shift it yourself.
Which brings up the obvious next question. You can't just lie on the floor of the submarine forever. Eventually, to survive a massive external crisis, you have to involve other people. You need help.
You do, but how you ask for help when you're covered in mud is really the make-or-break moment.
Okay, so how do you do it?
Well, the ancient imagery used to describe this phase is really striking. It speaks of offering a simple jug of wine and 2 bowls of food in cheap clay pots, passed quietly through a small window.
I mean, a jug of wine in a cheap clay pot sounds almost inappropriately casual for a life or death crisis.
It's not casual, it's unpretentious. It translates to stripping away your ego and dropping the pageantry entirely.
Okay, I see.
When you are at absolute rock bottom and you need to approach someone who has the power to save you, you cannot afford ego.
This is where it gets really interesting. For anyone navigating the corporate world, or really any dynamic where you need a bailout, imagine a CEO whose company is literally weeks from bankruptcy. The modern instinct is to put on a show.
Always.
They create a slick 40-page PowerPoint presentation. They artificially inflate the revenue projections, they put on their most expensive suit, and they walk into an investor's office trying to pitch a massive opportunity.
Which the investor sees through in about 30 seconds. Because they can smell the desperation underneath the polish.
Exactly. The polish actually makes you look less trustworthy. So instead of the 40-page deck, imagine the CEO walks in, sits down, and slides a raw, ugly, unformatted spreadsheet across the table. Just brutal numbers.
The bare truth.
Yeah, they look the investor in the eye and say, I am entirely out of money. Here's the exact mess. I have no leverage. Can you help me?
That raw spreadsheet is the jug of wine in a cheap clay pot. What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanism you were triggering. In a crisis, vulnerability is a massive tangible asset.
Because you completely bypass their defensive shields.
Right. When someone tries to sell us something, our guard naturally goes up. We look for the catch. But when someone shows us their open wounds, admits they are powerless, and simply asks for help, our fundamental human empathy kicks in.
It creates a genuine connection.
Yes. By offering the ugly truth through a direct, unfiltered, one-on-one channel, you create a connection that slick presentations and corporate jargon can never achieve.
So let's look at the aftermath. Say the ugly spreadsheet works, you get the lifeline, the investor bails you out. Or if we're talking about a health crisis, your diagnosis stabilizes.
The storm starts to subside.
Right. The natural, incredibly human reaction is to pop the champagne, ring the bell, call everyone you know, and celebrate the fact that you survived.
And according to the Can Hexagram, that is the single most dangerous moment of the entire journey.
Why is surviving dangerous? That sounds backward.
Because of the intoxicating nature of relief, the concept here states that when the pit finally fills with water, it doesn't overflow. The water just reaches the brim and levels out.
It fills the hole enough so you can finally walk across it.
But it doesn't flood the plains. It is about supreme, almost painful restraint.
Restraint when you just want to celebrate.
Right. People often want to use their absolute last reserve of energy to create a flashy blossom. They want to show the world and themselves that they are back. But in this survival framework, true mastery is knowing exactly when to stop.
I have seen this happen so many times. Someone finally clears a terrible mountain of corporate or personal debt. They spent years digging out, and they are finally back to zero. What do?
They go celebrate.
The very next week, they take on new debt to throw a massive launch party, or they try to immediately expand their business into 3 new cities to make up for the time they lost while they were in the pit.
We call that archetype the triumphant expander. They survive a near-death business or personal experience, and the massive rush of dopamine from merely surviving makes them feel invincible. So what do?
They overextend again.
They immediately recreate the exact conditions of overextension that caused the original crisis in the first place.
It's a dopamine hangover. So the action guide for you, if you are listening and you just survived something awful, is this. Embrace the boring flatline.
Seriously, embrace it.
When the crisis ends, do not throw a party. Do not increase the marketing budget. Do not buy a new car to celebrate. Just let the water be calm. Let your nervous system regulate for a minute.
You have to accept that getting back to baseline is the victory. Baseline is the goal. You don't need a parade. You just need steady, dry ground beneath your feet.
Okay, but we have to look at the dark side of this. We've mapped out the ideal path. But what if you didn't do any of this?
What if you made all the wrong moves?
Right. Let's say you hit the pit, you panicked, you thrashed around wildly, you kept your massive ego when you asked for help so nobody threw you a rope, and you completely missed the window to let the water level out.
That leads to the final and most severe stage. It represents the ultimate dead-end trap. And the imagery used here is incredibly grim. It describes a person being bound by heavy, thick ropes and thrown into a dense thorn bush for 3 years, unable to find a way out no matter which way they turn.
Bound in a thorn bush for 3 years? That is so visceral.
It is designed to be. It represents the harsh reality of missing your survival window. When you exhaust your resources fighting the wrong battles, and when you alienate your allies by refusing to be vulnerable, you end up in a long-term psychological or sometimes literal prison.
We're talking about situations where you trap yourself, like a multi-year toxic lawsuit where nobody actually wins, but you just keep paying exorbitant lawyer fees out of spite.
Or a deeply bitter business partnership.
Or a toxic personal relationship that you cannot escape because your own thrashing tied the financial and emotional knots too tight.
Exactly. The mechanism is simple. If you fight the water, you eventually drown in the thorns. Every movement you make just ensures you get cut deeper.
So if you are listening to this right now and a pit in your stomach just dropped because you realize, oh no, I'm in the thorns right now, what is the takeaway? How do you survive the thorn bush?
The only way to survive this thorny trap is to immediately stop struggling against it.
Just stop moving entirely.
Yes. Every time you thrash, the thorns cut deeper into your skin and the ropes pull tighter around your chest. You have to mentally prepare yourself for a long, quiet confinement.
Wow.
You stop fighting the daily reality of your prison, and you aggressively conserve whatever tiny spark of energy you have left. You simply wait for the day when the ropes eventually, naturally begin to rot and loosen on their own.
It is a really tough pill to swallow, but it is deeply pragmatic. So let's pull all of this together. Surviving a continuous cascading crisis isn't about magical escapes or cinematic heroism. It is literally about acting like water.
It is.
It's radically accepting the terrifying freefall instead of denying it. It's finding one tiny $10 win to prove to your brain that you're still alive. It's knowing exactly when to play dead and park a bad project to stop the bleeding. It's dropping your ego to ask for help with a raw, ugly spreadsheet. And maybe hardest of all, it's exercising extreme, boring restraint when the storm finally passes.
And the true beauty of this 3,000-year-old framework is that it puts the locus of control entirely back in your hands.
Which is what you need the most.
Absolutely. You can never control how many pits life drops you into. The external environment will always be chaotic and unfair, but you can entirely control your inner hardcore. If you do not let the panic rot you from the inside, and if you maintain that calm solidity while outwardly adapting to the shape of whatever pit you're in, you can float out of anything.
You keep the core solid and let the rest flow. So what does this all mean for what comes next? Think about it for a second. When water finally fills that pit, when it levels out and starts flowing smoothly across the plains again, that steady energy transforms.
Right, changes state.
It stops being a trap and it turns into a spark. It becomes a fire that needs something to cling to so it can burn brightly. Once you've survived the worst and the water is finally calm, how do you handle the fire of your own recovery?